Hola, soy Francisco Hidalgo. Hace unos meses publiqué un diccionario inglés-español de falsos amigos y para ello conté con la colaboración de dos intérpretes amigos míos. Una de ellas es Lourdes de Rioja, que fue la productora y diseñadora de este diccionario, y el otro es Rodger, que está aquí junto a mí y que tiene una cosa muy importante que yo no tengo, y es que es de lengua materna inglesa. Una cosa que me parece interesante es que, bueno, tú eres intérprete de que ven inglesa, lo cual quiere decir que trabajas hacia el inglés a partir de tus idiomas pasivos, entre ellos el español. Y en realidad lo que yo te pedí fue que hicieras un poco lo contrario, es decir, que intentaras pensar desde el inglés hacia el español, en lugar desde el español hacia el inglés. O sea que te pilló un poco a contrapié. ¿Te provocó alguna dificultad esto? ¿Te resultó difícil o viste que no tenías ningún problema?
Well, there's more to life than work. And in my life, most of the time in my private life outside the interpreting booth, what I'm actually doing is speaking Spanish. So in that sense, there's nothing unfamiliar about speaking Spanish or working out the impact of things from English into Spanish.
Uh-huh. Claro, no lo había pensado, pero es verdad que tú, en realidad, tu vida privada pues transcurre bastante en español. Y o sea que no era para nada una novedad para ti. ¿Y tú crees que aprendiste algo, te aportó algo el haber hecho este trabajo?
Yes, a whole lot, because all the time there were cases where there was a pair of words, one Spanish, one English, where I only knew one Spanish meaning, and it turned out there were a whole lot more. Or indeed, there were cases where there was no Spanish meaning that I knew of at all. So in either case, I come out learning something.
Uh-huh. Me acuerdo que cuando apareció el diccionario hubo gente que nos propuso que hiciéramos también una segunda parte que fuera de falsos amigos español-inglés. Y yo lo estuve pensando y te lo propuse a ti, y tú amablemente dijiste que gracias, pero que no. Que va a ser para empezar bastante trabajo, y luego realmente yo pensándolo bien me di cuenta de que tienes razón, porque seguramente no hubiera sido muy útil, dado que el inglés ejerce una influencia indudable sobre el español y sobre todos los demás idiomas, puesto que es un idioma hegemónico actualmente, pero en cambio la influencia del español sobre el inglés es mínima, se limita a algunas pocas palabras, y aunque quizá hubiera tenido un cierto interés lingüístico como curiosidad, pues utilidad práctica poca, probablemente.
Yeah.
¿Qué opinas?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think we were right to rule it out simply because you're doing a lot of work for a public that probably doesn't need it and is anyway very small. You've got to think about, if you're basically publishing, you've got to think about the public that you're publishing for.
¿A ti no te ha pasado mucho en tu vida profesional o privada el encontrarte con palabras españolas que influyan sobre el inglés y que lo modifiquen? Eso realmente no se da prácticamente, ¿no?
No, not really. I mean, there are difficulties that Spanish presents to, like any language, to somebody who's trying to learn it, to any foreigner trying to learn it. But whether the question is whether it's worth going into those difficulties for one specific language pair, for English speakers trying to learn Spanish rather than German speakers trying to learn Spanish. Sí. And there just aren't enough of those. And also they're not sufficiently inexpert, because this again you have to think about the public. English speakers who are learning a foreign language are probably doing it for fun, because they're part of the tiny minority who are actually linguists who like this kind of thing. The vast majority of people anywhere in the world who are learning a foreign language, which is probably English, are doing it because they have to. Not for fun at all, and they don't enjoy it. And they're not queuing up to do it in a different and more interesting way. They want the effective way, full stop. The cost-effective way.
Sí, justamente sobre esto último que acabas de decir, esto me parece muy interesante porque efectivamente el inglés es la lengua franca universal, entonces todo el mundo tiene que aprender inglés por obligación, y sin embargo los ingleses, los anglófonos, no tienen que aprender ningún idioma, pueden manejarse perfectamente en cualquier sitio con el inglés, y si aprenden otro idioma es por curiosidad o, sí, por curiosidad básicamente o por razones privadas, pero no por obligación, digamos, profesional. Y eso es algo que da mucha envidia a los no anglófonos, pero yo tengo la impresión de que tú también le ves algunas desventajas a esta condición de lengua franca, ¿no?
Certainly. But the disadvantage is that the average English speaker doesn't understand, doesn't notice, but they're nonetheless disadvantages. Because for starters, what you're doing is you go around the world as an English speaker, in practice, as you've said, imposing a foreign language on everybody you meet, yours. And even if you don't realize you're doing that, you're still doing it. The effect is that all of these unfortunate foreigners have to go through all the trouble of learning your language. And they still have to go through all that enormous, as you and I know, effort. Even if you don't realize that it's an enormous effort, that you take it for granted, as many people do, that all foreigners will somehow understand at least, which of course is not true. The effort is so great that an enormous number of people still haven't been able to make it because they haven't had the time, because they haven't had the teachers, whatever. So imposing that effort on everybody that you meet, everywhere you go, is, in diplomatic terms at least, in psychological terms, is an enormous burden. It's a kind of tax. In economics, there's a concept called seigniorage, I think, by which the people who issue the currency that everyone is using, in other words, nowadays the Americans, because they issue the dollar, make a considerable amount of money simply out of the fact that everybody else is using dollars. I'm not quite sure how the mechanism works because I'm not an economist, but that apparently is the way it works. And it seems to me that something similar happens with language, that the English speakers have an enormous advantage in the sense that, competitive advantage in the sense that they don't have to make the effort that they're actually imposing, even without realizing it, on everybody else.
Y quizá también otro segundo inconveniente, aunque sea menor, que se me ocurre para los anglófonos, es que ven cómo su idioma se degrada a ser mal utilizado por otras personas que no son nativos, ¿no? Y que acaban hablando una especie de mejor.
Well, there you have to distinguish contexts. Up until now, we were talking about the world in general and the effect of in practice, us imposing English, or English having been imposed by circumstances. Maybe the British and the Americans were entirely innocent parties. Who knows? But there's a different situation where English is really being used as a lingua franca rather than just what you have to, as a lingua franca, in other words, for daily business, rather than just with the foreigners who happen to come in, even in quite large numbers. In other words, the situation that you and I live every day in Brussels. That's a real lingua franca in the sense that you're trying to do quite important stuff, work all day, and you're trying to do it between people, none of whom may be native speakers of English. And at that point, what is definitely happening in Brussels to English, and what didn't happen to French when French was the lingua franca, when you and I started here, is that it gets degraded in the sense that it's no longer there's a risk at least, that it's no longer an operational instrument, tool for communication, because there is too much ambiguity. This comes back to the original point about worldwide English. And the disadvantages that situation has for the native speakers. One of them is that if you're a typical English native speaker, in other words, you've never learned a foreign language because you've never seen the need, you don't know what's difficult about a foreign language because you've never been in the situation of having to understand one yourself. And if you don't know what's difficult about a foreign language, then you don't know what's difficult in the foreign language that you're imposing by speaking it to foreigners. Therefore, you can't simplify your own production, which creates another perception of the worldwide perceptions of the arrogant American or the arrogant Englishman, which is the person whose only idea of how to make himself understood is to speak very slowly and very loud as if to a deaf child, which is a very fast way of obviously offending people worldwide. But in the specific Brussels context, yes, there is this major problem of loss of meaning, and it isn't actually solved by it isn't solved by the existence of a single identifiable form of simple English. People have been searching for this kind of thing for a long time, long before the need for it arose in Brussels. But it doesn't actually exist. When people talk about bad English here as being a simple solution for everybody's comprehension difficulties, what they're actually talking about is identifiably French distorted English or identifiably German distorted English, which unfortunately are not the same thing. And then there's an identifiably Italian distorted English and an identifiably Spanish distorted English and so on.
Claro, porque se habla a veces del Globish, que sería como esta especie de versión universal simplificada del inglés, y eso es falso justamente por lo que tú dices, porque el que habla mal inglés, cada uno tiende a desvirtuarlo o a deformarlo hacia su propio idioma. Entonces es posible, por ejemplo, que traduzca literalmente una frase hecha en su idioma, un proverbio, en inglés, cosa que para otro que habla mal inglés pero que de otra nacionalidad no tiene ningún sentido, con lo cual lo del Globish a mí me parece que en general no funciona muy bien, o puede no funcionar muy bien en determinadas ocasiones, ¿no?
But it is a threat in the sense the fact that the idea is widely accepted is a threat, because then it means it's not that all the German speakers in the world are going to be able to impose the kind of English that they like, which is of course the kind of English that other Germans speak. Because that's no more comprehensible than any other of the varieties of bad English universally. But the fact that people think of it as a solution distorts the argument every time they're talking about the lack of understanding and the problem that this represents and what possible solutions to that might be. And the argument then goes off in the direction of this chimera of bad English, which is somehow going to solve everyone's problems.
Pues muchas gracias, Alan, por
a pleasure.
Esta conversación tan interesante. Nada más.